In this video, we're going to go over some basic troubleshooting with the X7 response trigger. We're first going to start off shooting the gun. Once we shoot the gun a couple times, you'll see that the response isn't working as well as it should. Not really getting any kind of response out of it. So we'll flip it over to the other side, and we'll go over some of the things that you might run into that'll cause your response trigger not to operate correctly. The first thing that I usually always look for is the flow control fitting. If your screw is adjusted all the way out, it'll act as if it's not getting any pressure behind the response trigger piston. So usually I'll start off by turning that all the way in. Once you have it turned all the way in until it stops, you can pull the trigger, and that trigger should get really hard to pull. If it gets hard to pull, then that's going to indicate that you have a really good response trigger and it's pressurizing correctly and all the parts are assembled correctly. For whatever reason, if you pull the trigger and it doesn't get really hard to pull, what will happen is you probably have a leak somewhere within the system, and I'll kind of touch base on that here in a second. We'll go ahead and flip it back over. Most time we'll see that the fittings are loose, and that could be why you're not getting the pressure behind the piston. You'll get air that'll leak past some of these fittings. So I'll kind of go over the fittings with you real quick. Take one of the banjo fittings off, just to kind of show you what the back side of that fitting looks like. All the fittings have an O-ring on the back side. Here you can see the O-ring on the back side of the banjo fitting. There's also an O-ring on the back side of your flow control fitting as well. You want to make sure that these O-rings are intact and they don't have any kind of dirt or debris. You also want to make sure that your fittings are nice and tight. You also want to check your hose for any kind of leaks. Sometimes what will happen is if you're constantly pulling the fittings on and off the hose, it will kind of stretch out and flare out at the end, and that'll cause leaks. You can also have maybe a small puncture in the hose, and that could also cause a leak. We'll also go into the gun and show some of the other leak points where you could also have problems.